Tonight's guest is Jim Hoffman. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Vic. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. We appreciate your time. Jim, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm originally from Glendale Heights, Illinois, 30-some miles west of Chicago. Grew up there, moved out to California in 95 June. And I'm a teacher, and then I became a writer and a researcher because I am a history teacher by trade. I've been doing that for over 30 years. And now I work and live in Southern California.
Well, that's quite the difference in culture, moving from Chicago out to California. Did you have a lot of culture shock, or was it pretty smooth for you?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, because with all due respect, and I have a wife and 2 daughters, and they're both in their 20s, and my brother-in-law lives with us. But what I noticed, going from the Midwest to California, the work ethic's way different. It's just a matter, and I'm not trying to get political. I'm just saying I noticed, like, someone here would say, well, I'll see you between 12 and 3. Whereas in Chicago, you'd say, well, I'll be there at 12. That meant like 11:55. They don't do that here. And I don't want to say everyone's like that, but it's just a different mindset about work and sticking to your word, I guess you could say. But I love living here. I want to say that. It's great living here, and I enjoy it. Although now I'm a little bit alarmed, but that's another show. The whole drought thing does scare me.
Well, I can understand why it would. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's going to be any relief in sight.
No, and I've been through this. I mean, where I live, I can look and I can see what's called the Cajon Pass, which is the end of the Santa Fe Trail, and goes down into the LA Basin. And since I've been here since 2003 in this area, I've seen, I think, 5 major wildfires where I could walk out and I can see them at night. That's how close it is, maybe 25 miles from my house. It's pretty scary because there's a lot of trees and it's dry, and anywhere from a lightning strike to up north was a power outage that caused the fire to someone throws a cigarette out. And we had one that was caused by an arsonist. So, and it literally, it's scary when you go out and you see nothing but flames on the mountaintops.
Well, yeah, that would be awfully scary. Your home's right there, and it wouldn't take much for it to be lost. So, yeah, I get it. That would be enough to really shake you up. Jim, you wrote a book titled My Search for Dogman, Nature's Scariest Cryptid. What can you tell us about your book?
Well, as you know, you were the inspiration for that. It's a kind of a long, convoluted story, but back in 2018, October, I was sitting on my bed, and I was into Bigfoot at the time, and somehow your show, it was like a suggestion. It came in on my feed. I'm like, Dogman Encounters, right? What's a Dogman? So I started listening, and I think the first episode was episode 21, which I shot a Dogman. I believe that's the first one I ever listened to. And I was just stunned, like, I was trying to read it. Is this guy real? Is this fake? Is it a creepypasta type thing? And then after a couple of weeks at work, I'd catch myself laughing, like, I can't believe this, that people believe this stuff. But after, I'd say 2-3 weeks, I started really listening to your podcasts and others, and I realized, no, these people see something they're calling a Dogman. So I just started researching it on my own, and my book is really a book of discovery. I've written a couple books like that. One was on 2 were on songs, actually. What does my search for Nikki Hokey, my search for Shock Me? These are songs. My search for Dogman is I'm taking the reader with me. I'm like, what is this thing? What proof is there that they exist? What's the history of these animals? And by doing that, I learned a little bit about what's called the werewolf and a little bit about Bigfoot. And, it's more or less a synthesis of the information I gathered from the different podcasts and websites of, what is a Dogman really? And I hesitated to say it's the greatest cryptid. I called it scariest because if I had to, it's like, who would you rather face, Godzilla or, King Kong? And I would rather face Bigfoot, to be honest with you. So I don't think one's more powerful than the other necessarily, but I do think the Dogman scares me a little bit more than a Bigfoot. For whatever reason, that's how I feel. but my research is a synthesis of the information, and it's designed to show the average person, this is basically what's out there. This is the information that's out there. In no way am I an expert. I do not come across as being an expert. I say that in the book. I'm not here to say I know the truth. I'm just saying this is what I've learned in my search for this creature, and there's so much more to know, and I don't need to tell you that. I can't hold a candle to what you know about this creature. So hopefully when people read it, it takes them on a nice little journey, like I'm holding their hand and saying, this is what I learned.
Well, you sure can't beat the topic, that's for sure. And if anyone listening wants to get a copy of the book, if you go to dogmanencounters.com and visit the media page, you'll find a link for it there. That makes it pretty easy. But having said that, writing a book about any topic, Jim, requires a lot of work. But what can you tell us about what you had to do to prep for writing your book?
Well, good question. I'll be honest with you. I've been doing this since 1996, more or less. So I've been doing it a long time, and I can write really fast. And the best thing I could say is it's like a song. If any musicians out there would know what I mean, or even writers of novels or whatever, this story just kind of comes out. But you have to research. This is fact-based. And so I did a lot of research and listen to various podcasts or watch various videos, people describing what they saw, whatever. And I kind of outline it from there. And now this book, I spent a few months prepping it and writing it. And believe it or not, it was the COVID shutdown in mid-March. I'm sorry, I take that back. I started it in October of 2020. That's right. About 2 years after I started, I was thinking another book. So in October of 2020, I started to I'm going to write this thing. And by February is when I was basically done. When you write a song, this is what I want to say. When you write a story, it pours out of you. And so I did my research first, and then I just start writing. And again, I want to say my book is a synthesis. I try to understand what is a dogman based on the different witness accounts, and I try to put it all together in a synthesized format.
Wow, that question, what is a dogman? That could take up hours and hours to answer that question.
Yes, and I didn't realize it has there's historical information, even possibly the Bible. I didn't know any of this, so it's all in there. I learned some of it through your shows. And so, yeah, it's definitely, there's so much more to learn, and I don't need to tell you that, so.
Well, it's like a lot of things there, Jim. The more you find out about dogmen, the more you realize you don't know. So, yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Before we move on, if you've had a dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, either way is fine, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Also, you should know I've got a new Bigfoot show I'm producing. It's called My Bigfoot Sighting, and I put a link for it in the description for tonight's show. You really should check it out. If you listen, you'll see that it's a different kind of Bigfoot show, and I think you'll like it. Of course, you're here to talk about your book, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this. Your neighbor might have had a dogman encounter of his own. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, hopefully my neighbor and his friend can be on your show because they're really interesting. But okay, there's two guys, Mike and Pee Wee. I'll just use them. So Mike, he lives literally 50 feet from me, and he had, I would call it more of a hellhound encounter about a mile west of our house, literally on a side street called Red Wing and Paiute near Kiowa in Apple Valley, California. And he said he and his wife and a third person were in the car. It was like 2 a.m. And all of a sudden these huge dog-like creatures were chasing the car. And he said they weren't like regular sized dogs. I can't explain what they saw. I would rather you, Vic, ask them about it. I know Mike told me he's going to talk to you about it, but it scared him and his wife and his friend in the car. And he said they went home, they Googled like hellhound, and they saw what the image, there's probably several, but with the red eyes, ferocious looking. He said that's what they saw. And they were there and then they disappeared. Almost like and it sounds so crazy, but almost like an interdimensional type thing. Like They were there and then they disappeared. He said, I've never seen anything like it. And I listened to Mike. I'd known Mike for a while. I don't think he was lying to me. I think he really saw something strange. And, as to Pee-wee, I have to back up a little bit. When I started writing this book, I teach during the day and then at night adult ed. And my adult ed, the people I work with, the secretaries in the office, I was talking to one of them about, I'm researching this book, and I could tell by her eyes were kind of glazing over. And I asked her, you don't believe a word about this Dogman? She said, actually, I do. She said, I go out all the time with my husband into the San Bernardino Mountains and the San Gabriel Mountains with their Jeep. And she said, there's many times I feel really creeped out, like something's watching me. Although she said, I've never seen anything. I do believe it's possible. And then the other secretary said, I got to tell you the story. And she said, my sister was right near what's called Dead Man's Point, which is where Highway 18 and Bear Valley Road meet, heading east towards Lucerne Valley on the eastern side of Apple Valley. It's actually right near where Beyonce filmed part of her video called Spirit. Those rocks that you see, that's right near Dead Man's Point. But my colleague said my sister was like 2, 3 in the morning, heading back from the east towards Apple Valley, came to that point, saw this creature on the street. She said people were pulling over and, staring. And she said this creature it looked like a big dog cleaning itself. You know how a dog licks itself. And she said it scared the hell out of him. She doesn't know what it was. I tried to get her sister to talk to me, but I don't need to tell you how that goes. Some people just don't want to talk about it. And, but that's the story that my colleague told me. So I go to Pee-wee, get back to Pee-wee. And I'm talking to Mike, and then Pee-wee starts telling me his story. And I'll get to that in a second, but I'm thinking, wait a second, that's the second person that I know of who's seen what could be a Dogman near the Dead Man's Point. And what Pee-wee said is he saw 2 Dogman creatures near Dead Man's Point, a smaller one and a bigger one. And he took me, it's on my YouTube channel. And I recorded it. He took me at night. It was after midnight, and we went to that intersection. He described how the creature crossed from the north to the south at that junction, and it headed down a dirt road called Laguna Seca and headed south. And he said, I know it wasn't a dog. It was way too big. It was on all fours, and it kind of lumbered across the street. And he said it was as high as his vehicle. And he said that, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet off the ground is his hood of his car. And he said that thing had to be enormous if it stood up. And so it looked like a dog to him. But, whether or not it was a Dogman, I would have to say probably. But, we don't know 100% for sure. I went back on a later day and I put it on my YouTube channel during the day to show that spot. But what's interesting is I looked on a map of that area. And if you look to the south, Laguna Seca goes north-south. And if you look, it go all the way down, it's maybe 2 miles to the edge of the mountains. And there's a wash that dead ends there. And it goes up into the Crestline, California, Big Bear area, which is all forest. And the Bigfoot research people, In Search of Bigfoot or whatever that show was, they've been up there before. And I've learned, one of the things I've learned is, generally speaking, if there's a Bigfoot, there's probably a Dogman and vice versa in the area. But that wash to me was a sign that maybe that's how they're moving. They'll come down, and I know the area to the north of the Dead Man's Point, back behind those mountains, there's ranches and people with chickens and stuff. And, if I were a hungry animal, and I know that's kind of like a drive-through McDonald's, I'm going to go down there and grab some chickens. And Mike was telling me that he knew someone that worked back there in that area, which would be basically north of Highway 18, just before Dead Man's Point. And he said he knew someone that worked one of the ranches, and they had trouble getting people to go work there because of this fear of this animal. So I've not been able to follow up on that, but that interested me.
Whoa, when I listened to you describe how that area is, it's no wonder that you'd have dogmen running around there. Sounds like a haven for them.
Yeah, it's strange that if you look at the area, and in my latest YouTube, I tried to show the area. It's like, it's pretty desolate, and there's not much there, but that's the only thing I could think of is they're coming down when they're bored or curious. Maybe they're just hungry. They want a quick meal, and they know that there's, quick food there, quick food supply. They don't have to really hunt. They can just go onto the ranches and sneak into the chicken coops and just grab what they want.
Yeah, what more could they ask for? From what I understand, there's a place in Bear Valley called Deep Creek where you've done some field research. Has anything of note happened while you've been out doing that?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think I started talking about that, and then we went back. But anyways, okay. So if you go to Deep Creek, if you look on a map, Deep Creek runs north-south, and it dead ends at the federal land, which is right behind the Lake Silverwood Dam. There's a dam to the the southwest, and there's a spillway to the southeast. So dam to the southwest, dam to the southwest, spillway to the southeast. And I go as far as where it says, this is federal property, no trespassing. The gate's open. Some people go in there. I don't want any problems. So I stopped there and I did some recording. But my daughter told me, I asked her the other night, we were talking about it, and she went down to the actual hot springs, which is you have to go through private property to get there. It's a long story, and I do not encourage anyone to do this. So just a little disclaimer. But she's gone there, she said, at least 50 times in the middle of the night. And she was telling me this story, and this is not a Dogman story. This is a Bigfoot story, by the way. But she was telling me they were at it's a hot springs. It's water coming up from the fault line, and the hot lava. And so it's literally like coming up, and it's very warm, she said. And I've never been there, but again, she's been there, and she told me the story. And she said she had to go to the bathroom, went to behind the Jeep they were in, and she looked up, and she said she looked on this hill that was maybe, 75, 100 feet above her head. And she saw what looked like a large man standing there looking at her. And she said it creeped her out. And her first reaction was, what is this, this guy doing? And then she's thinking, no way, that's not. And she said it wouldn't move. This person, Bigfoot, whatever, wouldn't move. It was stiff. I asked her about the eyes. She said there was no eye shine that she remembered, but she said it was very tall and big. She couldn't tell if there's any fur or anything like that. But she said it really scared her. She said she looked up a couple times, and then like the third, fourth time she looked up, it was just gone. That was her encounter. And she said she always felt when she went back there, which a lot of people describe, as that she was being watched. There was, it was an eerie kind of feeling, but she was always there with other people. So, 3, 4 different people. And sometimes it was kind of a hangout for the local kids. There might be 20 kids back there. But she still felt like when she'd go back there, she said, I felt like something or somebody was watching me. I personally have not gone to the hot springs. I've gone as far as the end of Deep Creek. And I did tell you that I've gone there at night for the most part. And when I went there, I did have got bad vibes, like there was something there. Now, it could be just paranoia. It could be my imagination running wild. But I do feel like I know for a fact there are 2 major credible Bigfoot sightings that were probably about a mile or 2 to the north of where that street dead ends, because the Mojave River is right there. Mojave River it parallels Deep Creek, and it's dry. It's a dry bed most of the time. And I know that the Bigfoot Research Organization, you can go to their website. There's 2 sightings where Lemon dead ends into the river. Lemon Street dead ends in the river off of Oceana. I think it was 98 and 2003. There were 2 credible Bigfoot sightings there. And I'm not surprised. Again, they probably come down from the San Bernardino Mountains, and I think both of them were in the summer or the spring. And they come down and they're looking for food. Maybe they're curious. I don't know. But I did feel at Deep Creek, there was something, I felt something, like I'm being watched or something there. Whereas when I went behind where Dead Man's Point is, I went there at night with Pee Wee and Mike. I did not get that same sensation, even though it was creepy. It's dark. There's no light out there. I didn't have that same feeling as I did when I went to Deep Creek, for what it's worth.
I always tell people, trust your instincts. I'm glad that you did that day. And speaking of that, an eyewitness you've had quite a few conversations with has told you multiple times that you don't want to see a Dogman. Why are you going out, Jim, looking for them? Don't you feel like you might be biting off more than you can chew?
Yeah, I understand. It's kind of, I'm like the kid and the parent says, don't touch the stove. It's hot and I want to touch it, Yeah, my contact, who I'll call him Mr. Black. He asked me to not use his real name. He lives in what I call Shangri-La. Where he lives, it's teeming with Bigfoot and Dogman. I talked to him. He was my source in the book. I wanted somebody who really has seen these things, and he has sent me many pictures since we first started talking, which I believe was around November of 2020. We still talk. He'll text me, and we'll talk on the phone. I think I talked to him about maybe a couple of weeks ago. But he told me, this changed my life for the worse. I know monsters are real. And he said, I don't recommend anybody try to see these things or hunt them or whatever. But he told me one time we were talking, it's in the book. I said, if I'm out in the woods and I run into one of these things, what should I do? And he said, are you armed? I said, I don't have a firearm. He goes, you're stupid. And he said, I don't mean any disrespect, but he said, you're crazy to go out there without a firearm. And I said, wow. So I'm not into going out and like I'm some brave, crazy person. I'm just out because I'm curious. I respect the creature. I know that if I run into one, they could kill me like that, but that is a risk I'll have to take. And maybe people think I'm crazy. I have a passion for it. And I want to be able to maybe become part of the research community. That's my goal, really. And so I'm going to continue to look for these things, but I know that they're dangerous and that you have to respect them. And I have no problems with that. I have no misconceptions. I'm not going to go out there and, lasso one of these creatures and tie it up and bring it home. So, yeah. So Mr. Black, and I've heard some of your other guests on your show say, this creature is very scary, very intimidating. It can kill you. I remember the one episode, I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's Dan, but episode 51. And he talked about how he found bloody clothing. And the guy that's one of the most moving episodes I've heard of all episodes where I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. He's described, I think it's near Germantown. And he's describing this bloody clothing. I mean, some people are getting killed by these creatures. It's not something to take lightly. So yeah, Mr. Black told me you don't want to do it, but he said, I understand if you're going to do it, be prepared.
Well, it's always good to remember that you're not bird watching, so
no.
Glad to hear that you're going to take those precautions. Jim, if someone would have told you 10 years ago that you'd be writing a book about things called Dogmen, how would you have responded?
That's a great question. I grew up with WGN, Chicago, Creature Features, The Wolfman. And to me, I think of a wolfman as a guy that gets bitten by a werewolf or a wolf and he turns into a wolfman. I was thinking totally this physical entity that becomes a wolf and changes back to a man, because that's all I knew. And so when like I said, for 2 weeks, I laughed at work. I would be catching myself laughing. This can't be real. Dogman can't be real. A dog creature, as opposed to Lon Chaney Jr. and the Wolfman. That's a separate thing. That's Hollywood. This is real. It took me 2 weeks to figure out this is real. This is not, there's too many people are seeing this creature. So I would have never guessed that this, 10 years ago that I would have written a book about this, because I didn't even think it was real. I didn't even know they existed, put it that way. And I thought werewolf and that kind of a creature was all fantasy for the most part.
Well, you can't be faulted for that. I mean, after all, your whole life you've been conditioned to believe that there are no such things as Sasquatch or any other big things that go bump in the night. So, yeah, you can't be faulted for feeling that way back then. You mentioned the show where the guest talked about that incident that happened in Germantown. There's a picture that was taken near Germantown, Ohio that actually caught your interest because of what you think you found in it. Please talk us through that.
Okay, yeah. So I listened to that episode and I thought to myself, if there are a lot of creatures out there in various areas, maybe I could use a internet search application and look for these things online safely from my house, And so I started doing that. And the first time I went online, it was January 2019. It was like January 2nd or something. It's like 12 o'clock midnight or a little after midnight. And I had read about on your website, a guy from, it's in Illinois. I'm sorry. I forget it's Christian County, Illinois, Taylorville, Illinois. And he described exactly where he saw a Dogman creature cross the road. And when people do that and you're listening, you could literally go on a map, and I've done it many times, and get an exact location. And, Google, for example, Google Earth, they'll send these cars out and they'll take, pictures from various angles with their car. And I thought to myself, if I'm a creature and it's in the middle of the day, they're probably going to go out for the most part when people aren't around. These Google cars go out, when people aren't around, especially in a rural area. That's not going to be a problem. But yet I'm thinking, these animals might be curious. So in the one in January 2019, as I told you, I did not take a screenshot. I wish I had. I just wasn't thinking like that. But I was at the site where this guy described on the old Lincoln Highway heading into town from the east to the west on the north side of the road, what looked like a guy being followed by looked like a lanky, tall kind of dog creature. Sounds so ridiculous, and there's no way for me to prove it, but that's what I know I saw that night. I remember it blew me away, and I thought, oh my God, that to me was an indication, there's some truth to this. And then when I heard your episode, I think it was episode 51, I started to study the area. He describes specific streets. I think it's one of them's Germantown Road, if I'm not mistaken. And you just literally go to that street, and then you just, increase the screen size. And I studied and I'd plod along the road, and I saw what looked to me like a couple of dogmen sitting under a tree. And it could be large dogs. It may not be a dogman or dogmen, but it looked to me like they were creatures under the tree. And I don't know if I sent that to you, but I still have that somewhere, that picture. But I thought to myself, wow. And I sent that to Mr. Black. He pointed out, if you look to the right, a little bit to the right there's two dogs literally on the ground, or dogmen sitting on the ground like you'd picture a dog, but they were pretty big. But to the right, you could see, he said that's like a Bigfoot. And you could see it looks like a Bigfoot standing there. And they're like peering at this, what I would imagine is the car driving by, taking the pictures. Hey, what's that? Kind of a thing. And so in my book, I talk about that. You can, from the safety of your home, you can look for these creatures by using Google Earth or something like that. And if you listen to an episode that they're very specific, like this guy in episode 51, just write down, where's the location, and just check it out. Take your time, study the imagery. Remember that if you go on and you look at it, an hour later, it could be gone. And these are all going to be, for the most part, as far as I know, they're all daytime shots. So, it doesn't make any sense for them to take pictures at night, if you understand what I mean. But I went back, for example, to the site, to the location where I was using Google Earth to see if I could find that, what I thought was a dogman. Maybe I'm wrong. And it was gone. That picture was gone. So beware. And if you're doing it, be ready. Know how to take a screenshot with your computer. Know how to take a screenshot, so you got proof of whatever you see. I think eventually, and I talk about it in the book, that how they have a way to blot out faces and stuff in a crowd. They'll probably have scrubbing software that eventually will be able to block that stuff out. Because I've looked at imagery that it might be a shrubbery, and all of a sudden you see a blot. Like, why is that there? did they see something and they don't want me to see it? I don't want to sound paranoid, but when you're looking at a bunch of trees, why would they cover something up like that? And it's not like it was a mailbox or maybe with some kind of identifying information, which wouldn't matter anyways, because when you go on Google Earth or Google Maps, they give you addresses. Yeah, it's strange. But I say to people, if you're really interested in that, it's easy to do and it's totally safe. You can go, you don't have to go into the forest. You can use Google Earth or some application like that and look for these creatures. I want to add too, what I could see, what I think is a dogman, you might see a fig leaf, pictures are subjective, but once in a while you'll see really clear imagery. And I'm sure you've seen pictures like that. I've seen only a couple. I've seen a lot of images that you're going, okay, maybe that could be a dogman, could be a Bigfoot. But, be aware. You might find something that could go either way. It could be a leaf. It could be a light anomaly. It could be a dogman. But it's if you're interested in that, it's a safe way to look for these creatures.
Yeah, it doesn't get any safer than looking from your living room or your bedroom. So you're right. Well, it's about time for us to call it here, Jim. But before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Could I read a part of my intro because it links to you? Do you mind if I do that?
Don't mind at all.
So I'm not going to read the whole thing. And it's from my introduction. Oh, the horror films which we were able to enjoy. My favorite ones were the classics, though: Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, and of course the Wolfman, which really was my favorite. So my perspective of the Wolfman or werewolf was carved into my brain and my soul forever by the haunting portrayal of Chaney. One of this film's most famous scenes and one of the scariest and creepiest of all time was watching the Wolfman creep through the fog-laden countryside, which was probably a soundstage at Universal Studios, en route to another victim. Another, Chaney's magnanimous transformation from man to beast before the awestruck audience. The art of filmmaking does not get any better than that, even with today's advanced technological and cinematic tricks. I must admit, though, that the process in the film, An American Werewolf in London, ranks right up there. The Wolfman's intro is predicated upon huge, scary, quote unquote. A ticker tile scrolls along a trembling message, quote, the legend of the damned. In many a distant village there exists a legend of the werewolf or wolfman, a legend of a strange mortal man with the hair and fangs of an unearthly beast, his hideous howl a dirge of death. I mean, dirge of death? Do you remember those days of watching scary movies? And then along came Dogman Encounters Radio. So I'm tipping my hat. I'm paying homage to you because you really started this for me. You started this whole Dogman passion I have. Thanks, Vic. I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well, hopefully it is. Hopefully it's a good thing. It's really hard to say, though. But I do appreciate it nonetheless. I'm glad you found out about Dogmen, and I'm glad that you're so interested in them and decided to write that book. But having said that, Jim, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing all those things with us. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. I'll try. Have a great night.
You too, sir.
Thanks. We'll see ya.